So, and just these two movements?
Yes.
Okay, great. The seventh movement is one of the most challenging, I find, because of how you have to find sort of like the elegance and the Velcro quality of those chords without it sounding heavy or overly aggressive, right? To find the sort of joy and the spin of those chords. So I want to talk maybe mostly about sound and how we can approach both chordal passages and linear passages with the right hand. In general, your intonation is very strong, and you have a good conviction about the rhythm and the sort of pacing of the movements, which is very nice. Do you know the relationship between the seventh and eighth movements?
It's like more of a backstory. The second movement, the double movement's more of a backstory of the Bourrée.
Yeah. So each of the four movements in this partita has basically like a sister movement, right? That's called the double. So you have the first movement allemande, and then you have the double, and then you have second movement and the double, etc. So what I always like to remind people is that it's exactly the same harmonic progression, just in a different form. So we have a linear, in this case, we have a linear movement, which is the eighth movement, and then we have a chordal movement, which is the seventh movement. But they're identical in terms of how the structure works. So a couple of things to think about in terms of how you manage the relationship of rhythm, and then how you think about the sort of sisterhood between the two. So we can talk about a few things. But you have a very strong foundation already. Things are in a good spot. So one of the things I find helpful for this movement, especially at the beginning, because what's easy to happen is we crunch those chords, right? Because they're hard to get. It's hard to get it to sort of spin and sing outward. So what can happen is we work hard, and what happens is the sound kind of comes into the instrument rather than it's sending out. So have you practiced this without all four voices?
Yes.
You have. Good. So when you practice, you just do that much, you can find the character that you want, right? This. If only it was that easy, right? Can you try that once? No chords. Okay, it's already better. Now, instead of having one approach to the string where it comes and sort of grabs and stays, can we think about something that scoops through the sound? So let's just do that much. And when you come for the down bow, rather than grabbing and pulling downward and having it, I like to think of the bow as being really three-dimensional. It's kind of weird, but we can think of the strings as planes, right? Like here's your G string plane, D string plane, A string, E string. But instead, if we think about it, okay, we're going to move sort of like a rainbow. It can be concave, it can be convex, but we're always thinking about rather than. If I think of it as a plane, it stays kind of 2D. But if I think about it kind of like a scoop, like I'm going concave on the down bows and convex on the up bows, I can get more dimension in the sound, and then it doesn't feel as vertical. Can you try one more time? Same thing, no chords. That's already better. Try now with a little less bite on that first, on the down bows. Good for you. Yeah, that's coming along. So always try to think about, especially with chords, the shape of the bridge is this way, right? But with chords, I try to actually think this way. So I'm going to scoop through, because if I come down this way, I'm going to close the sound into the instrument. But as I finish the chord, I'm thinking about going out this way. Can you think about, let's add the chords back in, and now see if we can scoop through. That's better. Good. And see if you can make sure that you don't pull sideways. Okay, let's go back and separate the voices a little bit. So let's add just one extra voice. chase that sound even when you're adding the other voices. So let's add now the third voice. Sorry. Add the third voice. That's nice. That's really nice. Yeah, so now you have more ring in the sound. Now, when we add the fourth voice, I'm going to have you do a little bit of a trick that for this movement, I often will practice a little bit choked up on the bow. So I want you to move your bow hold up so that your thumb is, kind of like where the winding meets the leather. And try just open strings one. Yeah, what do you notice about when you're choked up on the bow?
It's more like tiltable.
It's more tiltable? Yeah, try not to tilt too much, but what do you notice about the weight? And like the ability to play the chord.
It's easier. It's like easier to not crunch.
It's easier to not crunch, exactly. So basically, what this is doing is, for those of us who have maybe seen a Baroque bow or an early period bow, it's structured differently and it's weighted really differently. We don't have the frog isn't nearly as heavy. The shape of the stick is a little bit different and it's much lighter. So essentially, what we're doing is we're trying to create a little bit of the feeling of what it would be like to play with an earlier bow. So by doing that, you're changing the weight so that it's not as heavy down here, and then you can find sort of the dance quality of that of those chords. So let's stay choked up and just loop that a few times and see what it's like to send your sound out. That's nice. Yeah, keep looping. And when you think about after you come up over for the curve of the chord, that you're then going this way. So like the scoop comes outward. One more time. Yes. Great. Can I just adjust you a tiny bit? What if you open a little bit here? Yeah, so that sometimes you like to come this way, and then the bow sort of, you have to fight the bow a little bit to find the resonance. So try one more time and make sure that the elbow doesn't stay too low, that the elbow's following, like, you gotta go to the G string, the elbow's here, and then it follows naturally up and down. Yeah. So I think what can happen sometimes is like, we're trying to do all kinds of stuff, right? There's so much to manage, and if the elbow stays too low on the G string, there's too much weight in the wrist, right? If we let the elbow be at the same height, and it's going to change depending on where you are in the bow, right? So if you're at the frog, it's obviously going to be much higher. If you're at the tip, it's going to be a little more subtle. But that you're always kind of making a box with your arm, height-wise. Yeah. I often think about chords as Velcro. So like I think about what it feels like to like pull. Do you have like shoes that have Velcro on the Adidas slippers or something like that? It's that kind of feeling. So if you have a nice sort of very satisfying rum bum, that sort of grab with all the Velcro teeth, that's what I want to think about. So that it's not just one hit, but and while I'm managing this convex motion, I'm also thinking concave. That's what's going to send the sound out. Okay, so let's do one more time. Let's loop a little bit. And when you feel ready, go on. make sure that your 4 is extended as far as it can go, and that you don't change the bow technique. I know what's weird is that we can't separate our brain into 2 parts. We just have 1. So if the left hand is difficult, the bow often does weird stuff, even though it doesn't need to, right? So all the bow is doing in this moment, if it were open strings, you could do it, no problem, be very ringing, right? But once we put the fingers down and we have to manage the difficulty of that, the bow all of a sudden is like, I don't know how to do this, right? So let's do just that gesture, all open strings from the beginning. Very nice. Now, add your fingers back in and see if you can remind your bow to stay that simple. And you can break if you need. You can pick up your 4 if you need to get to the top, that's fine. You know what helps too? See if you can finish the chord a little bit earlier in the bow, because if you finish out here, it's hard to recover. So make that Velcro grip be tighter in the amount of bow. I'm trying to aim to finish like around there. Yes. Yes. Yeah, you see how the chords are now much more warm and open, and we don't have that kind of crunching feeling that happens. It's one of the hardest things about this movement. So if you can always remind yourself that the chords are Velcro-y, scoopy, I think like ice cream scoop through the, regardless if it's 1, 2, or 3 voices being stacked together. Good. Let's go from the beginning one more time with this in mind and go on. So remind yourself, you can stay choked up wherever you're comfortable. Actually, I'll practice sometimes chordal movements choked up for a week or so, and then go back and see if I can make sure that I emulate that feeling. Let's go on a little bit, and as you add more chords, remind your brain that, oh, if I play open strings, my bow knows how to do it perfectly. Add the fingers into that feeling. Sorry, too quality is so much more ringing. So I think that's one of the most important things that we as violinists have to search for. We have to crave the sound we want, and then do trial and error until we figure it out, right? Every instrument's a little different, every body's a little different, every weight and bow is a little different. So always search for ring. Okay, so now when we get to this next gesture, like the wind. Okay, yeah, that's nice. And I think for me, the beginning, there's something very like kind of powerful about it. And you know, we're in B minor, but here, we get to go into a major key for a minute, and we can, I think, enjoy that a little bit. What's wild about almost all of the movements of Bach sonatas and partitas is there are almost no dynamic markings. They're almost all blank. Few times he gives us forte piano, or he gives us, an indication that suggests something. But almost always we're inventing the dynamics, right? So the beginning, I think, deserves that forte feeling as you're playing. Now, when we get here, explore different territories. Because if chords kind of always have a vertical feeling. It gets to be a little bit the same, and we lose track of the line, right? So if we play without the chord, it becomes simple, right? And then you add the other voices, and it becomes just harmony to that. But I think that feeling of then you can sort of feel the longer structure of the phrase, rather than like, okay, I gotta do my chords and I gotta do my separate notes. So let's think of this as a new character, somebody that comes in and if we're sort of bold and triumphant in the beginning and something maybe even stormy in the essence because it's in minor, then we get here, and as you mentioned, wind, something that's a little bit more lighthearted. Somebody changes costume, changes character. Can you think of that? And maybe you have two sets that come maybe decrescendo, and then when you get to the scale, you go a little crescendo. Try. Temps posture. No, from right there is good. Let's approach the double stops a little bit more gently, almost like you have like marshmallows on both sides of the chords. So it's not without focus. Rather than, sometimes you have, like I like to talk about food because I love food. Like you put pepper on the edges. See if you can put marshmallows on the edges. Because you want to give yourself a little bit of flexibility. If I'm here, it's harder to manage the coming over of the chords. See if you could round that out and let it be gentle. You're going to give yourself more flexibility. Same place one more time. Top posture. What do you notice when you round your first finger?
There's more like control over the bow.
Exactly, yeah. So this is, especially in the middle and upper part of the bow, this is what basically kind of governs. At the frog, the pinky is really governing because there's so much weight, right? So let's do an exercise. Put your bow parallel to the floor and then tuck it this way. Yes, and then back. Yeah. So here you notice the weight's in the pinky, right? This is frog vibes. And then you turn it this way, that's tip vibes. So if this is too straight, it's gonna kind of stiffen everything and you don't have as much flexibility in the bow. So yeah, try to always remind yourself, even just do little exercises like this, make sure that everybody's nice and checked in. And you have a nice vocal, just make sure that this doesn't get too straight. Good. And then when we get to, if we stop on each eighth note and make it the same, I think it becomes also vertical again. But if we play, that together. Let's go from. But even from a half an hour ago when we started, I'm noticing a difference in your sound. Can you hear it? Yeah. What are you noticing about when things ring more or when things have more direction? What do you notice?
It's like I can extend and contract like my fingers easier, and it's not gonna sound out of the ordinary. Like it sounds more cohesive.
You're able to like manage how you want to shape things, right? Like the melody line is clearer. You have more. Basically, I think of this movement as you have to be kind of a ninja because you have to be like rum bum rum bum yum ba-da-da. And then moments where you then have to be very lyrical and long, have a long line, right? So I think keep trying to chase that sound. Find what you need in your technique. Like, okay, my arm's a little bit tight there. I think my chords are too crunchy. Or, oh, I notice my index finger is getting straight again. I want to make sure that I have flexibility there. Or, oh, okay, the left hand has a hard chord. All the right hand has to do is play one gesture, but it gets crunchy because it's stressed out about the left hand. Happens to me too, like, if this is hard, my bow's like, I don't know how to play violin. And if my bow is hard, my left hand's like, I don't know how to play violin. But really, if you split them up, they definitely know what to do. You just have to make sure that they can coordinate together. Great, let's play the whole first half now with all this in mind, see if we can sew everything together. When you do that, what is a bourrée, do you know? Do you know from what sort of genre it belongs?
It's a dance.
It's a dance, yes. I think you can dance a lot more through this, so that if you imagine, I've done a couple of Baroque dance classes in my day. I'm a terrible Baroque dancer, but the dances they're almost never heavy, and they're almost never. There aren't like huge gestures. So imagine if you can. If you were to like make up your own bourrée, like bum bing bum bing bum bing ba-da-da. There's a lot of like they're often up kind of on toes and things like that. So the chords do rum bum rum. Maybe there's a knee bend, but there's still kind of like a dance element to it. So let's just play the first half. So to the repeat sign, and see if you can incorporate tall posture, Velcro spin, scoop, flexibility, and lots of creativity in what you want to do with your dynamics because Bach didn't give us any. This time through, you also took a little more time when the chords needed it. I think that's okay. You're all by yourself. No one's in charge of, a baton in leading you. Good. And let's just talk quickly about this last scale. I think if you can feel, if we play, it gets a little bit flat. But if I can, you think about the way you shape through the scale so it doesn't just feel like however many notes it is. 11 notes. Rather than just 11 notes in a row, try that once? So that there's clear direction through. contact, but you did really well that time. Can you think about the bow being, let's go back to this. Do you have a favorite type of science?
Right now it's chemistry.
Right now it's chemistry. Have you ever done anything in physics or math where you talked about the infinity sign?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you imagine that your bow is an infinity sign? Raise your hand if you know what the infinity sign looks like. Okay, good. Everybody, 100%. So we can have an infinity sign that has this kind of amplitude, right? That has like tall amplitude, but it's still continuous, right? We can also have an infinity sign that has this kind of amplitude. Can you imagine that as you change strings, your infinity sign has a really, really small amplitude? So rather instead of that. So I'm going to try and make sure that my string crossings are like almost like a little infinity sign snake. That's the moment of the infinity sign, right when you change. That's nice. Bravo. Yeah, and do you notice when you corrected your posture, the infinity sign got easier, right? Because if you're down, you have to manage, you have to work harder to get that to happen. So really nice. Okay, let's go on to the double for now, and then I want to show you something between the two. Can we go from the beginning of the eighth movement? Okay, great. Yeah, let's talk about that much. So basically what we just played in the seventh movement is what we just played in the eighth movement, right? So this is a really good movement to think about shape, inventing your own dynamics, and this infinity bow thing when the chords come in, when the arpeggios come in. So we can have, I find that with all the doubles, it can get into etude mode pretty easily, right? It can sort of feel like, okay, good, I'm gonna play my eighth notes, okay, good. Okay, good, I did good, it was in tune, it was correct, but it can feel a little bit like don't number 12, right? Or Kreutzer number 6. So I think what our job is to think about that kind of energy. And then when we get to, we have to then adopt that energy. And then the infinity sign comes in. If I play, I'm getting into that playing mode, right? Where like I played the A string playing, the D string playing, and the G string playing. But if I think of it as a broken chord, right? Such a beautiful chord. And if I think of those as chords rather than individual notes, the bow becomes much smoother. So I lose that infinity sign, but can you try that once? So go from and when you get to those slurs, imagine that you're scooping through the infinity sign on the back end. certain exceptions, I try to imagine that the bow is on an infinity sign track. Sometimes the amplitude is big, sometimes it's very thin, but I think that helps. I'm gonna ask a weird question to all the violinists and violists in the room. If I were to describe the perfect string crossing, and if you think about a double stop first, how would you describe that? If you think of a double stop first, and then you think about what a string crossing is, how would you relate those two things?
Bourrée.
Bourrée?
On two strings.
Bourrée on two strings? Good, what else?
There's a little bit of that overlapping moment when you go, and then it's gonna get very smooth, like legato. You won't have that bump.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I tell my students.
Correct. So I think, this is spoken like good teachers, I think the key to a great string crossing is a double stop that you're barely not playing. As soon as you're not playing a double stop, you're crossing strings, right? So if you start with a double stop and you release that slightly, that's a string crossing. But I think often we see two strings and our bows are like, okay, I gotta play A and then D and then A and then D. But if I think about it, like if I play a string crossing like that, or right, I'm achieving the same thing, but one has an amplitude like this and one has an amplitude like that, right? So basically I try to think about string crossings as the moment of not playing a double stop. So in this case, and if I think, then I'm basically releasing the double stop slightly. Good, let's go from the beginning of the double one more time. Good. So let's think about, sorry to stop you already, the character of the seventh movement. What's the character that we talked about before of the Bourrée? Ninja-like. Right, there's something bold about that. So I think we can capture that a little more. Then we can switch. Then you can change characters when we choose to change the dynamic and the feeling. So at the beginning, I think start with that same energy. We don't really get to go that high in Bach very often, right? I don't think he ever goes above an F sharp, this. I don't think he ever goes above that in the entire 6 sonatas and partitas. So it's only one note different. So I think enjoy that moment that we get to finally reach up. So in that one bar, we get to go to almost the peak and almost the bottom. So can you show us a much more sort of contoured version of that? And aim for a sound that's going to be really glowing. Think about, you want to send your sound like spinning through that window out there, out to the trees. Excuse me, pressure. So that as you're pulling through the scale, you're thinking about the bow gaining, it's like gaining a halo into the sound. Not to take away, what you do really well is you have a good core to your sound, which I don't want you to lose. But you're putting like glow on the edges of the notes rather than a direct sort of change in the string. So the difference between that where there's a little more index finger pressure. Do you see how the sound kind of opens? Chase that a little bit. Think about spinning your sound out and a little less index finger. Also, I think it makes it a little simpler in the sound and gives you more space to ring. So you, of course, talk with your teacher. My fingering doesn't have to be yours, but just something to try. And to find the glow, I think particularly in this movement, to find the glow through the versus different, except that I'm releasing a little index finger pressure and I'm chasing the sound that wants to have glow through, like to the back of the room. So a lot of it is trial and error, and I know obviously if you're in your own bedroom it's going to sound different than when you're in a nice church, right? But to always search for that feeling. You can even make up your own version. You know, I often tell my students, on that day in 1711, I'm not sure exactly when he wrote it, but he happened to write down those notes. But if it were a different day, he might have written he could have written something totally else, right? But with the same harmonic structure. So you could make up your own if you want to practice your scales with them. Make up your own version of you could make up your own version of what's kind of like Bach but different. Find ways to kind of chase that feeling, chase the spin. Well, I want to do just one quick thing at the beginning of the second half of this movement, and then I want to play something together. So what I like about, you know, he technically gave us separate, but I think what's cool is if you do the repeat, and this is if you do the repeat, that you do two different versions. I love the I think that's really nice. There's something very scooping about it, but then one version that's slurred, and then try one version that's separate, and see if you can find a similar character. Good. Now do a separate version with lots of brush stroke, lots of energy. I'm basically painting the string with a paintbrush. So this is kind of the approach to the bow. Very brushy. So I think you're basically in the right part of the bow. Maybe come up slightly, and I'm thinking about the back of the hand, and like you have a fat paintbrush. Try the separate version ones. Yeah, a little bit more daylight between the notes. Bigger brush. Do the second one. That's getting it. So these are just things to play around with. We have so much license in Bach because he gives us amazing notes and harmonies, but almost no other directions. So we can play around with. Maybe there we get a little bit playful, a little bit spiccato. Take a little time there, and then moments to kind of play. Okay, let's go back to the very beginning. It's the last thing we'll do. I want you to play the Bourrée, and I'm going to play the double. See what happens. So what I would love for you to do, put on your voice memo on your phone, record one movement and play against it, and then record the other one and play against it, and see how it inspires you. Because you find, oh, okay, that's the same chord, but I wasn't aware of it, right? Oh, that's the same gesture, or that's the same direction, and then you put